Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Hi, it's Greg Frick here again at HFO-TV. Thanks for coming. I've got Deniz Arac here. He's a PSU student in the Real Estate Center with a master's, getting your master's in real estate. Also happens to work at Trammell Crow, one of the largest developers here in the region and the country. Thanks for coming. Kind of want to get an update on a couple topics you're very familiar with. Why don't we start off with kind of your update on IZ? I mean, we've all talked about inclusionary zoning. The restriction was lifted 2 years ago. We saw a huge rush of permits up through February of 17. And now there's kind of the cities come out with some numbers, we've seen other numbers. Kind of what's your take on, I guess, the success or lack thereof of IZ that you've seen in this market?
Yeah, and my take is that I don't think there's any surprises from where we're sitting on what was going to happen. We saw that huge rush. I was part of some of that, getting projects vested, and then kind of figuring out that they're not going to work. I mean, quite frankly, even market rate development projects right now are getting hard to pencil. So with the affordability component, you could definitely see what's happening with the market right now and how many of those 19,000 units are actually going through.
It's a good question. I mean, that's something we were talking with somebody a couple days ago who tracks this, and my big question was, we know the number of permits that went through. The question is going to be in 3 years when we look back, how many of the 19,000 actually went to fruition or extended out? Because we're starting to see a lot of calls and activity of, hey, I've got something that's pre-IZ. Do we know anybody? And like you said, even take the inclusionary zoning out, it's still getting skinny in terms of construction cost, rent levels, and other things, and even making those kind of pencils. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, a lot of people trying to sell entitled land, pre-vested. So it's tough out there right now, and with the construction costs, tariffs, you don't really know where you're going to be, and then all that supply that's coming on.
Right.
I think you're going to see a delay in kind of with the supply that's coming on soon, and then there'll be a few years where there's not that much, and it'll let the market kind of
self-correct a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But then there will be, I mean, people are still moving here. So you're still going to have a need for all that housing. That's not changing. So then you're going to see another big boom. And I think the biggest problem with, and I've wrote about it in the paper for the quarterly for PSU, is just the incentives and how they're not necessarily aligned with
the goal that they stated goal.
Yeah, I mean, you have 10-year tax abatement, but you have basically affordability requirements in perpetuity. So, they're not necessarily aligned, and I know that the city has said they wanted to wait 3 years before they changed anything, but I mean, it's just going to compile on each other and make it a little bit worse in the future.
Which kind of leads into because I know for PSU, you guys do kind of a housing analysis, and we've talked about this with inclusionary zoning and the urban growth boundary, and kind of how do you deal with urban sprawl and density with affordability. I know different municipalities had to look and go to Metro to say if we want to bring some land in. And I think you did something on King City about bringing some land in the UGB. Maybe you could kind of give us a kind of a background on what that looks like, because the question for people from out looking into Portland saying, hey, look, you've got a density issue, you've got a shortage on supply, you have this urban growth boundary, where are we going to bring more housing in, and how do we do that? Kind of give us your take on what happened there. Yeah,
and actually one of the conclusions of my inclusionary zoning article was that you would see some more multifamily development out in the suburbs. And so part of the analysis that we did for King City, they're trying to bring, I think it will be coming up in December, trying to bring in their urban reserve area into the UGB. And they had a kind of a master plan, one area with very low density development, one area with higher density development, still single family homes, and then they had their own kind of high density center, city core and all that. And when we did our analysis, we found that the medium density and the low density, that still pencils with how construction costs of that type of product is. But
because we're doing a single family or two-story, we're not doing podium construction.
Yeah, and then once you start getting, it's kind of the problem that you always have when you start doing the suburban work, is that the construction costs for multifamily just get a little too high. So we were showing that those weren't penciling out at some of the projected rents that we were showing. So I think that you can definitely add a lot of housing in those middle areas and maybe do more of that instead of having a really urban core. I think that's harder to do. And
yeah, you said it's the construction costs are higher on those. So unless we're not at rent levels or construction, and again, we've talked about our construction costs going to go down. I mean, there's tariffs. There's some, we've got a supply or demand issue in terms of subs and things like that. Until we see a slowdown, I'm not seeing those costs drop down significant enough to offset that. So.
Yeah, and we're tracking that as well. And there's still a lot of people turning down work, but
right.
You are starting, we are feeling that there's almost a tipping point right here where people are starting to come back and
right.
asking for, are you still doing that project? Or so it's whoever's looking out the next 3 or 4 years instead of the next 1 or 2.
Right. And that's what I think I've seen some subs. I've talked to some builders saying now, first time in 3 years, I'm actually getting a call from subs saying, hey, are you doing a project? I don't know if that's, they're looking or they're saying, as we talked about, those 19,000 units that got through, we don't think they're all going to go through. So those projects that maybe were on the board, hey, we're going to start next year, those may be getting shelved, so they're having to fill their pipeline up.
Yeah, and then it also, kind of ripples through the whole industry with, the architects who are always on the front end.
Right.
A lot of them have had to do a lot of restructuring recently.
Yes.
They got so big to, draw those 19,000 units. And now, it's getting a little more lean for them. So, yeah. So
now for your work at Trammell Crow, I know they do a little bit of, commercial and residential. Is it based on the status of the market? Is it, hey, we're looking more on the suburban areas just due to the fact of, supply, demand?
Yeah, well, I mean, we do a lot of industrial work.
Right.
And that's been our bread and butter. And there's just, there's not a lot of industrial land out there. Uh-huh. So, we're definitely, I think we'll always be doing industrial land deals, but there's also a lot of guys from out of town come into town trying to do industrial because they see our vacancies here.
Right.
And so there's a lot of other people in the market as well. And while we'll always be there, we're also trying to diversify multifamily, office, whatever it needs to be.
Well, as people always ask me where we are in the cycle, I say always go talk to the industrial and office people. As long as there's still demand in office and industrial, multifamily will be fine. Mm-hmm. And we may have a little bit of a oversupply for a short term, but if you look at a long-term horizon, we're going to be undersupplied. And if we've got industrial tenants and office tenants coming here, they're going to need workers, they're going to need a place to live. So I think that's a better barometer of where we are on the cycle. So, yeah, well, good. Well, thanks for coming in and talking with us, and we'll see you next time on HFO-TV. Thank you. Very good. Thanks.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.